Hey, church family, welcome back to the FBC Durant podcast. I'm Garrett Scott.
I'm Corey Williams.
I'm Sarah Hughes.
On this episode, we're actually just the three of us. We're just going to debrief the previous three episodes that we had Pastor Gary on, mainly just going through Discover FBC. We're just going to kind of dive deeper into like our personal, stories with church and like kind of what we took out of the podcast. But before we do that, we got to do a little bit of house cleaning and we have announcements.
All right, so announcements. The first thing is that we did go to 3 services. So now on Sundays, worship's happening at 8:30 a.m., 10 a.m., and 11:15 a.m. So come to any of those. Life groups at 10 a.m. along with other weekly meetings. So if you're not going to a 10 a.m. life group, then you can check in to see when some other life groups are happening that aren't at 10. Wednesday night meals just started back up in the fellowship hall every Wednesday at 5 p.m. So come get some free food. The next men's ministry meeting is September 15th. College students are going to the Rangers game on September 20th.
Jealous.
Saw You at the Pole is happening September 25th, so mark it down. And then one big one is that J groups are starting back up. If you're interested in leading a J group or just being in a J group, then just contact Jim Hodson, and we'll expand on that a little bit more later. We just celebrated 1 year of our Light of Mine special needs ministry, so that's a praise. And then also we just celebrated 25 years of medical missions, so that's another praise.
Very cool.
That is cool. I didn't know it was 1 year of Light of Mine ministry. That felt like
Came quick.
2 months ago.
Yeah, it really
So
is.
that's awesome. Hey, that's great. So we need to dive into this. We obviously our first 3 episodes, we just really want to bring the pastor and really kind of like dissect FBC Durant, what we stand for, what we're built on. We learned a lot about the history of the church. Some manly man just carried logs across Main Street, built the thing, still here.
Old Mo.
No, I think we've added on.
Yeah.
But mainly we just want to kind of like dive into our personal experiences. It's kind of like a get to know the hosts, I guess, a little bit better thing. I guess like the first thing is like, what is our experience with Capital C Church or just church in general?
Global C Church. So we kept referencing Capital C Church. And we want to point out that is the global church, not just our local body, but the body of churches that are evangelical, believe in the gospel. And as far as my personal experience, growing up, I grew up in a church very similar to this. So a Southern Baptist church was something I was used to, and moving to Durant, it was something I was familiar with. But as I've gotten older, whether it be getting to know people from other churches or churches literally across the globe, whether it be Venezuela or Berlin, it's really encouraging to see people doing the work that we do here, literally across the globe or across town. It's my first thought, to be honest.
Yeah, I did not grow up in church. Not as far as like, I didn't go with my family didn't go. We didn't go together or anything like that. I went to youth group in high school, a very, very small church. And that was just kind of like a social gathering at that time. I wasn't saved then, so it's a little bit of my testimony. I didn't get saved until I was in college. But I've gone to several different sizes of churches, just been in several different types of communities. Like I said, my family didn't really go to church growing up, so most of my experience with the Capital C Church and the Small C Church have been in adulthood. So I think that's interesting. Same thing as Garrett. I have been really lucky to be able to go on some mission trips. I got to spend a summer in Asia whenever I was in college and just I've gotten to see a lot of how other people are doing church across the globe, across Bryan County, I guess, is what I have to offer here in Oklahoma. And then just same thing with like getting to go on missions to different places. Like this summer, went to New York and got to see how they do church there. And I like how everyone's doing it differently, different cultures, different everything like that. But we're all just wanting to worship Jesus at the end of it.
Okay, Garrett. So you were raised in church, right?
Very much so.
Sarah and I, not, right?
Okay.
You just said you were not.
Yeah, absolutely
okay, so
not.
I was also not raised in church.
Okay.
Did you ever do you ever find like a con to that, like kind of being in it so young and just kind of being raised? Did it ever feel like it just became like, well, this is what you do? And is there a pro or a con to that?
Yeah, I think based on, you develop a perspective of church as you grow older. So, side note, my nickname from some of my closest friends is literally born and raised, and there's a backstory to being like literally born a Christian, which is not at all theologically accurate.
We do not condone that theology.
but that's as deep as I guess it goes, is to be born and involved in the church, specifically a Southern Baptist church is all I've known. I think there has been over the years trying to separate maybe just kind of traditional things that occur within the church, which is what is actually biblical, but by no one's fault intentionally. It's just some things that we naturally develop in the church. Trying to think of a specific example, but yeah, I think you can run into going through the motions, being in a place that is like a second home essentially, but there's also a connectedness. Like, I don't know if we were talking the other day, but the commitment my parents had to church and the fact that I would be there so often. When I moved off to college, I was kind of in a place where I didn't have the same community. And by default, when I was struggling with something, I would go to a church. That was literally somewhat of a coping mechanism. I was struggling with some things going on in life, but found myself getting up on a Sunday morning, going by myself to a church almost out of habit. And I guess that would be a healthy habit. So maybe some pros and cons that have rubbed off on me.
I was just curious. Yeah, we had a conversation. You mentioned that the other day, where it is like, because you do hear the story of like people who get raised in church, but then like when they do get out on their own, they're like, reject it. It's rebellion. It's like, my parents made me do this.
Yeah.
I need my own identity. Whereas for you, it was the pro.
Right.
It worked out for you. You were like, hey, I'm off in college. I need community. Where do I find it? Oh, yeah, church.
Yes.
I used to go there all the time, and that's where you find people. And so, no, that's cool. I was just curious because I was also not raised in church. We're part of the WWJD movement.
Yeah, we are.
We're right at that age where, like, I don't know what your experience was, but when I was like in middle school, high school, because I started youth like you did, like some kid moved down the street and invited me, and I was like, all right. There was never any like stigma or like persecution as a teenager for me to go to church. Everyone went to church. Church was kind of cool back in the early 2000s. Like, it just, everyone was into it. Everybody had the bracelets, and so I never felt like it was a hard choice to go. But yeah, you went because it was a social thing.
Yep, absolutely.
And so that's kind of like, how I landed in church. I still come to church with my wife. My family still doesn't really come to church, so we're still kind of on an island unto ourselves, and it is a big community thing for us, for sure. So
I think something that shook up my view of church and my experience was my first opportunity to go overseas and visit Venezuela, which hopefully sooner than later we'll visit with Guillermo and talk about his experience from the church in Venezuela to here. But going to Venezuela to see that they were doing the same exact work at a crazy rate of evangelism and community and encouraging one another in their faith, that did something to me in the way that I viewed church back at home. It was kind of like this realization, like, oh wow, this really is happening in other parts of the world. And I think that was really impactful for me, and I look forward to visiting with Guillermo more and the Church of Venezuela.
Okay. Sarah, I'm curious. I'm just going to ask y'all questions, so I don't have to be personal.
That's good.
No, but like, so we have a more similar take where we didn't start going until it was like youth, and it was kind of something to do. When do you feel like church took on a more serious context? When do you think like that part of it shed, and like you were like, no, I go here for like spiritual strength, for accountability? Like, when would you say that happened?
I think, honestly, I was just thinking about this as Garrett was talking. I think like this is obviously seems like a duh answer, but like whenever you actually get saved, I feel like that changes the church going experience for you, because you can go to the church your whole life, and if you're not saved, then it's like just something to do, or because your parents made you. It's because you don't have your own faith, really. I never was going to, well, not never, the Lord can do anything, but I wasn't going to have my own faith probably because I didn't really know anyone who was actually following Jesus, and my parents weren't, and like no one in my family was. So it was just kind of like something to do. And I never really like got it, I feel like, until the Lord saved me. Which was when I was in college. And I feel like that for the first time is when I like was looking forward to going to church, not just for like a social aspect, but to actually like hear the word. I was actually excited to hear sermons, which I would have like never thought possible before knowing Christ, because like the sermon was always like the boring part to me before I got saved. And then like it just completely flipped for me.
That's cool. All right. I'm trying to like think how I would word it for myself, because I feel like I was one of those kids that got saved a lot. You know, I'm like constantly like, oh my gosh, it's that whole like some theologians said like, you know, are you saved in your head or your heart? You know, hell's only 18 inches away. Or you know, the scary like, you know, fire and brimstone stuff. And so I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna go down every invitation, you know, until somebody's like, hey man, what's up? But like, and I feel like it finally just got to a point like in adulthood where I was just kind of like, you know, it's a dirty word, deconstruction, but that's kind of what you meant, where you kind of start going like, all right, there's a lot of indoctrination, there's a lot of traditional stuff, there's a lot of fundamentalism. It is kind of like deciding I need to pursue Jesus as myself a lot in my own. I think it was just like I was always waiting for the church to do all the work, you know, and like someone to give me like a good like, you know, here, this one will fit you, you know, like put like a cool Christian jacket on you, see which one fits, because it felt like everyone else around me always got it and like I didn't. And I was like, oh no. So I think it was like, for me, it was very much like, and then I think marriage had a lot to do with it too. I got married, and I think, you know, you have this other person that like reflects back at you a lot, and you're kind of like, you know, you see the good in yourself through them, and the bad in yourself through them. And I think like that was also when I started like kind of going like, all right, I got to be more intentional with like, I don't know, like capital C church in like just the context of myself a little bit, so that I could like better navigate the capital C church as a community. So, I mean, and that looked like a lot for me. Like that was like leaving a church I was at, coming here to FBC Durant. And, you know, I mean, I would say a lot of this has happened just in the last few years, like where I really was kind of like finding my footing in a lot of this, especially in church. So, It's interesting. So, like, if you take anything out of that, it just looks different for everyone, I guess. So,
Definitely looked like I was just checking my phone while you were talking, but I was not. I was looking up a verse.
It's like fantasy football.
Let me check this real quick.
Starting.
No, what that made me think of is, you know, trying to figure out your faith on your own is scary.
Yeah.
So it's very understandable if you're young and immature in your faith that you want to keep running back to a salvation point in your life to make sure. But I think the church is what helps us work out our salvation. I was just thinking of Philippians 2:12, had to look it up. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. And part of him working in you in that sanctification process, I feel like, has to involve the church to grow you.
Oh, like, yeah, for sure.
Needing the maturity of believers around you to help you understand this is my faith, and it is going to be a challenge, and it is going to be painful to become more like Jesus in this process. So I think there's a lot to be said for when we're immature, we need the church, global church, to help us understand what our faith is.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's very helpful.
So in the context of just like being in a local church, and here we're like a good mid-sized church, I would say, at FBC Durant, how has the local church influenced your faith?
I think that, like I said, I got saved when I was in college, and I was in a good community at the BCM Southeastern. Had a lot of accountability just because I was around a lot of people who were following Jesus daily, and it was it was a really good growth period for me because I was like so eager to get into the Word, and I had just really never done that before. And I never had people around me who were encouraging me to do that. But then, like, when you graduate, and like I graduated college and got married like shortly after, and it was just like a lot at once, and you kind of like come out of that community, which is not a church. I was going to church while I was in college, but it just felt different. It was like I went to a smaller church, and there wasn't that many people my age there, so it was just I was kind of leaning more on like the BCM for like my community at that time. So like shifting into like adulthood and marriage and everything, it was like a big adjustment, like a lot of adjustments at once, like getting a full-time job for the first time, being married, being like trying to get connected to the local church. I feel like during that time, the local church was just really key to helping me through all of those different life stage adjustments that I was going through, because I feel like it's kind of easy to get lost a little bit after you graduate college. I know that I've talked to several people who have done this, just like because you kind of feel like you lose community a little bit, if that makes sense. Like all your friends spread out, like, you know, people move away, and you just kind of like feel lost a little bit. And I feel like the local church was so important. I made some really good connections here. It was a little different at that time, but just some really good connections, some deep connections. And I feel like it just really got me through some times where I easily could have been just having a really difficult time with not being in community. So I was just really grateful for the local church during that time, because it's just such an adjustment. And like you can be, if you're a believer, like you can stray from the Lord, you can have a hard time. Anyone can fall into that, especially if you're not in community. So I feel like it was just so important for me during that time.
So you brought up the BCM. Garrett, you were involved in the BCM.
Yes, sir.
Was that a positive or negative experience for you?
It was positive.
Okay.
I mean, anytime you get a group of 20-year-olds trying to figure life out together, it can be interesting.
I had a negative experience. That's why I'm asking. So I'm just, again, everyone's different. So.
No, I did. I can follow along with what Sarah was saying. So I can even take it back a little further. When I was younger, after my friends who I had grown up in the church with together, it was kind of a core of kids that were just church brats. You know what I mean? And so after our salvation experience, we knew that, we were supposed to live differently and do the right things. And so we'd group up, we'd huddle up and be like, we're going to follow Jesus and not mess up or whatever. And then these little 13, 14-year-olds, they mess up.
Yeah,
and then you're like, now what do we do? And it's like we were practicing discipleship without any oversight, And so transitioning to college, I would run across people that were a little bit older and can speak from a different perspective, looking back a little bit more, someone older. And so I had that encouragement, but I do think even past college ministry, when I was able to integrate into a local body with all different ages, there was some wisdom and maturity that younger people could not provide me. Maybe even some like correction, even maybe discipline, spiritual discipline, and just pointing things out that I needed to look for, that an older individual was aware of than a bunch of younger people trying to figure it out by themselves,
And that's why I bring it up. And bless you both for having great college experiences. And again, like I said earlier, mine was just like, there was a lot of times in my life where I was looking around and going, everyone gets this but me. And that was collegiate ministry. Everybody's having this great time. And I'm just like, I hate it here. And like, I feel left out and I feel like I'm not getting what everyone else is getting. And I think for a long time, it forced me to kind of go like, look at things like, you can go all the way back to nurseries, to children's church, to the youth group, to then collegiate ministries. And I think I was like, there was a time where I was like, are we just conditioning people to be like, this has to be catered to you for you to engage with Jesus? Like we have to figure out your age group, your likes, your dislikes, and be like, there's donuts, there's this kind of worship, there's this kind of setting and aesthetic, how tight the person speaking you's pants are in a given age group, are they wearing dunks or loafers? It's kind of that thing. It's like, and it freaked me out where I was like, for a long time. And I think that's where I did run face to face with like the local church is the answer, because you can't cater to like everyone.
Right.
It has to be like God first, Jesus first. And then it's like, all right, we have a bunch of ministries, and find your place and, your community. And by all means, I think it's incredibly important to like have older people when you're young. And then when you're older, like I'm in a weird middle ground. Me and my wife are like in our 30s and we're childless. We don't have a community here. You have children.
I have children. Sorry. I was keeping up with the 30s
I was like,
thing.
whoa.
I was keeping up with the age group.
Garrett's disowned his
No, I have
children.
children.
No, he has
Lots of
children.
them.
Yeah, he has many. And me and my wife are like, wow, there's not really another childless couple here, but okay. So it's one of those things. But like, again, I think that's the beauty of the local church, that like, and it's great y'all had great experiences, and I think people have great experiences in youth and nursery, but it's like you have to like hope that you're not being conditioned towards like kind of this, what they call like sexy Christianity, but like that you're in a local church that's going to be like, well, it may not be. You may not live overseas. You may have a 9-to-5 job, and like your mission field is going to be like sharing the gospel with the person at the desk next to you, and maybe it's not going to be as glorious as that guy made it, or this person said it, or this Christian literature book made it out to be. And I think that's the job of the local church, is to be like, hey, we're not actually going to put you on a pedestal. We're not going to make this for you. We're actually going to say, here's Christ, here's Jesus, and, this is the point, And so I like that y'all brought up, just kind of that, these different experiences, and like y'all had this and I had a different one, but then we all kind of land at the local church, and I love it. It serves as such a good purpose,
I think something you brought up is something that everybody runs into at some point, and maybe this is another pro from when I was younger. As involved as I was when I was younger, I learned at an early age that church could be hard.
Oh, yeah.
It could be challenging, and the more involved you are and the more you integrate yourself in something that's going on, or even serve, like it gets hard, it gets sticky. Real relationships, if you're trying to grow a relationship with people in life, it can be a challenge. And I think that everyone comes to a point, just that verse, working out our faith with fear and trembling, knowing that God has us, but we still have to grow and mature. I just think of, you've got to be willing to put yourself out there.
Oh, for sure.
I think when I started growing the most was when I made myself available to the youth ministry, or how I could help in the college ministry. I think of guys like Ty Kitchens trying to help him out, or helping Gary when I was younger, moving chairs, setting up stages for Falls Creek, whatever. I think of a certain experience specifically with Pat Whitley. I don't even know what we were doing. It was a disciple now when we were out working. But something about working side by side with these men over time built that relationship, which then turned into, this is a good dude. I'm going to allow him to speak into my life, and I'm going to listen, because I see his character, I see who he is and how he follows the Lord. But you do have to make that effort to be involved in the church and be willing to serve. And I think you referenced it earlier. Sometimes, and I've been in this point in my life, we'll sit in the church and wait to see how the church might serve me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like you get more if you're willing to step in and be a part and start serving. And that's where a lot of the relationships and work happens.
I think it's like, I think it's so important, like any ministry, like youth ministry, BCM, like anything like that. I think it's great to have people who are in the same stage of life as you, same age, but like it is just so incredibly crucial to have people who are not in the same stage of life as you, who are older and wiser than you, because I just think about like all the times in my life where, like you said, like older the older generation, someone who's just older, further along in life than me, has lived more life. The Lord's already put them through some stuff that maybe I haven't gone through yet or that I'm currently going through, and the Lord knows that. That's like the point of local church, like to connect us with people who, someone, I lost my dad almost a year ago, and just sitting at like a dinner and somebody saying, yeah, like 30 years ago, I lost my dad and I still struggle. Like I still have these things going on, and like just the Lord putting those people in my life, just have really helped me in just different capacities, in different ways. And that's because I'm a part of the church, and I would never talk to that person. I would never be connected to that person probably in my everyday life, but because we come here together, we get to fellowship and we get to have conversations like that, and the Lord uses that in my life. So I think it's pretty cool.
I like that. That's interesting. Because, like you said, it is comfortable to be around your people, your tribe, your age groups, people that it's easy to socialize with. But like you said, you may not know a lot of people your age that have lost a parent that can have that conversation with you, other than maybe your own parents, maybe. Like, that might be the only people in your life. And even then, you're like, yeah, but you have to love me. You have to say encouraging things. But then to, have someone in the church who's way older than you or, and has lost a parent and lost them 30 years ago, and they don't have to, relate with you. They don't have to, pour into you, but they choose to because that's your church family. So that is cool. That is, again, another benefit of the local church being as diverse as it is, in a spiritual sense.
A side note to what I said earlier was you got to jump in and work. I don't mean that as you just got to, get after it and you'll learn some things. No, it's something we wanted to point out that we kind of touched on in the last few episodes, but in our Discover FBC, towards the end of it, there's a discussion about spiritual gifts. And so in serving your church, thinking of it as an actual body, whether it be a thumb versus an ear, right? They have different function, different gifts. I think serving the church can be hard work, but also if you're applying your spiritual gift to serving the church, it can be a real blessing. And those relationships can occur through you just working through your spiritual gift. So I have the joy of serving with the worship team. And over the years, the rock star Jason Earls behind me is someone that I've got to know really well, just through the fact that we both enjoy music. Mm-hmm. But we've had this shared experience of working hard at learning music and trying to serve the church to the best of our ability. But at the same time, we've got to know each other just by simply our proximity and the things we like to do, which is amazing. I've asked him parenting questions before, what do I do here? And that's just, to me, that defines the local church in a small example. To reference the episodes we've done previously, they follow along the pathway for church membership in our church body. And those 4 pillars are worship, connection, discipleship, and mobilization. And kind of in short, simply put, that looks like engaging in worship, connecting with people, growing deeper, and leveraging it all. And we have ministries that will see someone grow in their spiritual maturity. Are there any specific ministries that mean a lot to you that you'd want to share?
I can go first. There's a few.
You're up.
I don't know, am I on the worship team or I'm like a weird backup.
You're on.
If someone can't play.
You're in the rotation.
So yeah, I'm in the rotation, and so I do get to be on the worship team a lot, which is cool. And then if I'm not on the worship team, I get to help Cole with media stuff, mainly just turn on a soundboard and make sure no one sounds bad.
Praise God.
But you get, that's interesting because when you think about churches, you do think ministries, you do think about women's group, men's group and stuff like that. And there's this whole studio we're sitting in right now where Cole makes a lot of magic happen and it's a ministry.
Yep.
Cole, you work here. They give you a paycheck.
It's his gift.
It's a ministry, and it's a hard one, but it's one of those things that I like serving on the media team because it is this like unrecognized, I think sometimes ministry where people don't understand that like the words, the sound, all this stuff, the cameras, the streaming, that's all happening because of Cole and a team, and I think that's pretty neat. And then like obviously we have the Hispanic ministry that my wife is from Venezuela, and so like that's something she used to serve in, and like it's really cool. And like I feel like this last Sunday they had to pull my wife out of service because a family showed up that only speaks Spanish, and so they came and sat with my wife and she translated the sermon. And like it's cool that we have that my wife can do that, or Guillermo can do that, or like any one of our Hispanic members can do that. And that's just really neat that we have that right now, and so like I think that's super cool. And I think that's growing and it's huge. And I mean, this podcast in a weird way is going to hopefully become a ministry, like to our church. Like we at least give information. We tell you when things are happening, We're
trying.
And so, hey. And so I think like it's cool. And like, it's interesting in these different ways, under these pillars that all these ministries happen. I was in a J group, and I was in a J group with another gentleman my age, and then 3 dudes that the average age was like 80. And it was awesome. Joe, John, and Gary. And that was like honestly like one of the best years like as a Christian, and just like listening to these dudes that have done way more life than me, pour into me and pray for me, and like talk about just all this different stuff. And like it was huge. I remember when I wanted to be in a J group, I requested specifically, put me in with some dudes from the early service. Like I don't want to be with people my age.
Give me that wisdom.
Like give me like some dudes that are gonna maybe yell at me. I don't know. And they weren't. They were the friendliest guys in the world.
That's
but like
great.
still, like they were very cool and very challenging, and I love that. And so like and again, you can go back and listen to episodes where Gary really breaks these 4 pillars down. And it's just really cool. Like, what about you guys?
A couple for me. One is going to be like under the mobilization, so like our missions, and that ministry, and just all the different things that have grown. Whenever I first started coming to FBC, there were some youth trips going. And that was kind of about it. And just to be able to see it grow, I was able to go this past summer to New York City and take my son with me, which is really cool. It makes it look a little different for me on the mission trip as far as like the capacity I'm able to serve in and what that looks like. But it's really awesome to be around other people who are serving the Lord and willing to give of their time and their resources to do that. And my son growing up around people who are doing that and seeing that. And then the summer before, we were able to go to Berlin, just me and Cole. My son stayed with my mother-in-law, and that was like a whole different experience. I got to kind of go and not be mom for a week and just get to serve and do something a little different. So it's just been I'm also on the missions committee, and getting to see other people's hearts for it, and like some things we do for that is we give funds to people trying to go on mission trips, and it's always so encouraging to hear other people talk about why they want to go, why they feel called to go, things like that. So I feel like that's just a constant encouragement to me. And then another one that is encouraging to me is just the nursery, because I have a 2-year-old, and I'm going to have another soon, and it has been just so encouraging. There's always there's people in there who are willing to love on my kid, and even when he's being difficult or if he's crying when I'm dropping him off, and I'm able to go into the service and actually listen to the word we preach without trying to wrangle my toddler, which I did for a long time. And they're just it's a lot. The people who work in the nursery, and Kate and Kaylin, everyone who's leading out that ministry, that's a hard job. There's a lot of kids in there on Sundays coming and going. I mean, I only serve every 6 weeks, and I can guarantee you there's a lot of kids in there every Sunday, and they do such a good job, and they're just such an encouragement to me. So those are mine.
Yeah, and as small as some responsibilities, like you're referencing the studio, may seem, they all play a part in serving the kingdom in a way, which is really cool, really encouraging, because we have so many ministries for so many different people, whether it's choir, teenager ministry, medical missions, things that we're celebrating, their anniversaries. There's just so much opportunity. More from a personal experience, just kind of a testimony. I am involved in the J group. And in the J group, you share things that you're struggling with or things that are on your heart. And I'd shared with my guys that we've been missing life group. And, what's true about a biological body is if something's not connected, then things aren't working right. And so feeling disconnected from the life group, my family was missing out on that encouragement, being accountable to the word, specifically what Gary preached that Sunday. And so getting to join them again this Tuesday was just extremely life-giving and was a blessing to me. And so those are a couple of ministries I'm thankful for.
No, I think that's good. Like, and you brought up your J group. I talked about my old man J group, which was fun. And so we do need to talk about that. J groups are starting and like how you can get involved with one.
So J groups are starting soon, and we mentioned at the top of the episode that if you're interested in getting involved in a J group, you can contact Jim Hodson, but I just want to restate that because I do think that they're really important and a really good asset to believers and just a good thing to be a part of and for your growth. So if you are interested in something deeper and some more discipleship like that, you can contact Jim Hodson via his email. You can call the church office and they can get you to him. And then also there are other ways that our J groups form. I know for some of us, for both of mine, they formed a little bit more organically through maybe life groups or just people you spend more time with. And that's another encouragement, I think, to get involved in life groups because J groups a lot of times come out of those life groups. And I think that it is a really cool experience to be in one that's just organically come up. But I also think that if that doesn't feel possible for you or that feels difficult, that you can still be in a J group and you should still contact Jim to try to get connected for that in that way.
That really speaks to our mission and vision. I love the simplicity of it and the way they've developed it, and that worship starts with being a part of worship and that it leads to connection and maybe being part of a life group and discipleship where J groups develop. And then as we hold each other accountable in our growth, that we would want to leverage it all. We'd become mobilized, whether it's in the workplace or getting to go to Berlin, New York, Tulsa, wherever. And so that's a beautiful thing about what we get to do here as a church member that I'm thankful for.
Yeah, and just like kind of like break it down what a J group is, just in case you're curious, because we keep saying J group, and maybe you haven't heard what that is completely yet. Again, I believe Gary went through it on one of our previous episodes, so go back, listen to it. But again, it falls under the discipleship pillar where you are kind of committing to a year to meet weekly with some, people. And again, you can get in your tribe, or you can do what I did and be like, hey, put me with people that are not like me. It is whatever, but you're just going to read through you can do the Old Testament, the New Testament. I mean, I think we have different reading plans, don't we? And then it's just discipleship. It's holding each other accountable. It's memorizing verses. It's confessing. It's praying for each other. And it's a really cool thing. And so like I really encourage you to do that. Even if you're like listening to this and you're sitting next to two people that you go to church with, and you're just like, hey, let's start a life group. Go find Jim and say like, this is it. And he's either going to say yay or nay. And if he says nay, I'll kick him in the shin.
Just keep working.
And say, give me my book. So he's not going to say nay. And so like, it is really cool. And I think the way to close this out is we did our third episode with Gary was on church membership, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what is your case for church membership? This is a controversial topic, by the way.
That's right. To challenge somebody to be a church member, to make that commitment to be a part of this local body, provides a lot of the things that Gary talked about, but on a more personal level. I think for me, it's the accountability to my faith, but also how I lead my family, how I parent my children, and having the church body around me to support me with all these different ministries, but with relationships and individuals is just so important. And I always reference back to the body, but being part of a body that functions together to be life-giving and to hold each other up and to function as one rather than a lone ranger, I think you've mentioned before.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll throw that in there.
Yeah, I think that the biggest case for church membership, I think obviously like the just off the top answer is like we can't follow Christ and continue to be sanctified and look more like Christ by ourselves. I think it's really difficult to do that. And also just I've had a season of life this past year that's been really difficult. I am so thankful that during a darker season of my life where sometimes I didn't feel like reading the Bible or being a part of community, I had people around me to lift me up and to remind me of the goodness of Jesus even in dark times. And I just think that we're not meant to live as lone rangers, and that's the reason why, is because whenever you're in a dark place and you're by yourself, it's so much more difficult. And so becoming a member, being side by side with people who are struggling, that can be hard and it can be look different at times, but I think it's just so important to have that accountability that we're talking about, that constant reading of the scripture, even just having the ability to use our spiritual gifts and be allowed to serve. It just all kind of leads you closer to Christ and helps to sanctify you even when, maybe you don't feel like doing that in the flesh every day.
That's good. Corey, anything controversial?
Yeah, I'm going to be the controversial on the podcast.
Stirring.
No, I just think I'm like, while y'all are talking and I was listening, but I am like having to kind of take what y'all are saying and put it through my own experience of and I know I mentioned it in the episode with Gary that I used to think church membership was really stupid. I was just like, this is just some
really
traditional, fundamental thing. And it's just whatever. I don't know why I got to sign a piece of paper, commit. I'm here every Sunday to the point where, the church I left, I was the youth pastor for 5 years there. But it's weird that I went from that to whenever we were leaving that church and coming here, it was all about membership. I was like, Jube, we need to transfer member. I was somewhere. It's like that C.S. Lewis got in a motor car and wasn't a Christian, then ended up at a zoo and was a Christian. At one point, I thought it was stupid, and then the next, I thought it was really important. Yeah. And I can't really tell you why. And so, if I had to answer it, I think for me personally, it is trusting a church, because I've been burned by some churches, and so I think God's brought me through a lot to come to a church and be no, I really want to commit to this. That was a lot of my conversation with Gary when I joined. I was I want to be here, I want to commit. I don't want to do music for 1 year. I told him I know I play instruments, but I was doing worship within a month, and so it was annoying. But he didn't respect my boundaries. But it is interesting that I did go from there. I think that's the beauty of the Lord brought me to that place where I think it was just really a big deal to say Gary, I want to trust a church. And so I want to commit to this and serve here. I don't want to just come here and hide in a large congregation. I want to come here and be a part of it and have a community. So I can't really tell you when that changed, but I just know that God changed that in me at some point. And I do think it is kind of almost baptism a little bit. It's a declaration of I'm here, and I'm a member of this, and that opens me up to I want to serve this church, but also I'm open to the rebuke by the church if I act a fool. And so I think that's mainly what it comes down to for me, is just I'm agreeing to trust this church and trust this church with me, and as well as I'm agreeing to serve as much as I can in it. So, yeah.
Okay, so that wraps up our episode on Debriefing Discover FBC. Thank you guys for joining us. Now go and make disciples of all nations.